Marcus Thompson stood in the hallway of Lincoln High School, staring at the expulsion letter in his trembling hands. The valedictorian, with a perfect 4.0 GPA and full MIT scholarship, had just been accused of academic fraud by Principal Robert Davidson. But what the principal didn't know was that Marcus possessed evidence that would expose a conspiracy reaching the highest levels of the school administration. This story of injustice, determination, and unexpected intervention will reveal how institutional bias can destroy promising futures, and how sometimes justice comes from the most unexpected places. Mark, before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as Marcus Thompson carefully organized his calculus homework at his kitchen table. It was 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday night in March, and the 17-year-old senior was finishing his assignments after his shift at the local grocery store. His younger sister, Aisha, slept peacefully in the next room, while their mother worked the night shift at the hospital. Marcus had maintained this routine for 3 years: school during the day, work in the evenings, homework until midnight. His dedication had earned him the top ranking in his graduating class and a full scholarship to MIT's engineering program. Everything he had worked for was finally within reach. The next morning, at Lincoln High School, Marcus submitted his calculus assignment to Mrs. Jennifer Caldwell, his favorite teacher and the only instructor who had consistently supported his academic ambitions. The assignment was particularly challenging, requiring advanced problem-solving techniques that went beyond the standard curriculum. Mrs. Caldwell reviewed the work during her lunch break, impressed by the sophisticated mathematical approaches Marcus had employed. His solutions demonstrated a deep understanding of concepts typically taught in college-level courses. She made a note to discuss his exceptional work during their weekly mentoring session. However, Mrs. Caldwell's enthusiasm was not shared by her colleague, Mr. Brian Foster, who happened to glance at Marcus's paper while borrowing supplies from her desk. Foster taught the remedial mathematics courses and had formed strong opinions about which students belonged in advanced classes. That afternoon, Foster approached Principal Robert Davidson with concerns about Marcus's work. Davidson, a man who prided himself on maintaining order and tradition at Lincoln High, listened intently as Foster suggested that Marcus's solutions were too sophisticated for a student from his background. Principal Davidson had been at Lincoln High for 12 years, during which time he had developed what he considered a reliable instinct for identifying troublemakers and overachievers who didn't fit the school's established patterns. Marcus Thompson had been on his radar since freshman year, not because of behavioral problems, but because Davidson couldn't reconcile the student's exceptional performance with his preconceived notions about academic ability. The principal requested Marcus's complete academic file and spent the evening reviewing 4 years of perfect attendance, honor roll recognition, and glowing teacher recommendations. Rather than feeling impressed, Davidson found himself increasingly suspicious. How could a student working part-time hours while helping care for his family maintain such exceptional academic performance? The following morning, Davidson called Marcus to his office during the first period. The principal's office reflected his personality: formal, intimidating, and designed to remind visitors of their place in the institutional hierarchy. Awards and certificates lined the walls, along with photographs of Davidson with various community leaders and school board members. Marcus entered the office with polite confidence, assuming he was being summoned for some positive recognition or college-related discussion. He had learned to navigate interactions with authority figures carefully, always maintaining respectful demeanor while protecting his dignity. Davidson gestured to the chair across from his imposing desk, without looking up from Marcus's file. The principal's expression was stern, his jaws set in a way that suggested he had already reached conclusions about whatever issue had prompted this meeting. "Mr. Thompson," Davidson began, his voice carrying the weight of institutional authority, I've been reviewing your recent academic work, particularly your calculus assignment from yesterday. Marcus straightened in his chair, pleased that his hard work was being acknowledged. Thank you, Principal Davidson. I've been putting extra effort into understanding the more advanced concepts. Davidson leaned back, studying Marcus with barely concealed skepticism. That's exactly what concerns me, Mr. Thompson. Your solutions demonstrate knowledge that extends far beyond what we teach in our advanced placement courses. Where exactly did you acquire this mathematical expertise? The question caught Marcus off guard. He had expected praise, not interrogation. I study independently, sir. I use online resources, library books, and sometimes Mrs. Caldwell helps me understand concepts we don't cover in class. She's been encouraging me to challenge myself academically. Davidson made notes in Marcus's file, his pen scratching deliberately across the paper. Mr. Thompson, in my experience, students who suddenly demonstrate exceptional abilities often have access to unauthorized assistance. I need you to explain how a student working 20 hours per week can produce college-level mathematical work. Marcus felt his chest tighten as he realized the direction this conversation was taking. Sir, I've maintained my grades consistently throughout high school. My work ethic and academic performance have been recognized by every teacher I've had. This isn't sudden improvement, it's the result of years of dedicated study. The principal's expression hardened. Mr. Thompson, academic integrity is the foundation of everything we do at Lincoln High School. When students submit work that exceeds their demonstrated capabilities, it raises serious questions about the authenticity of their achievements. Marcus struggled to process what he was hearing. Principal Davidson, I've never cheated on any assignment or examination. Every piece of work I've submitted has been my own effort. You can check with any of my teachers. They'll confirm my commitment to academic honesty. Davidson opened a desk drawer and withdrew a formal document. Unfortunately, Mr. Thompson, your recent work demonstrates such a significant departure from typical student capabilities that I'm obligated to launch a formal investigation. Until this matter is resolved, you are suspended from all classes and extracurricular activities. The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. Suspended? But, Principal Davidson, I have AP exams next week. My MIT scholarship requires me to maintain my academic standing through graduation. A suspension could jeopardize everything I've worked for. The principal slid the suspension notice across his desk. That should have been considered before submitting work of questionable authenticity, Mr. Thompson. The investigation will determine whether your academic record reflects genuine achievement or systematic deception. Marcus stared at the document, his hands shaking as he read the formal language, accusing him of academic fraud. 4 years of perfect grades, countless hours of studying, sacrifices made by his entire family. All of it was being dismissed because his work was too good to be believed. Sir, Marcus said, his voice tight with emotion, I understand you need to investigate concerns about academic integrity, but suspending me before any evidence of wrongdoing has been presented seems premature. Can't the investigation proceed while I continue attending classes? Davidson's response was final. Mr. Thompson, students under investigation for academic fraud cannot continue participating in school activities. The integrity of our academic environment requires that we take these matters seriously from the outset. As Marcus left the principal's office, he felt the stares of other students in the hallway. Word traveled quickly in high schools, and he could already hear whispered speculation about why the valedictorian had been called to the office during class time. His carefully maintained reputation was beginning to crumble based on suspicion rather than evidence. The suspension notice required a parent's signature, which meant Marcus would have to wake his mother early from her much-needed sleep after working a 12-hour hospital shift. He would have to explain that her sacrifices to support his education might have been for nothing because his academic achievements were being questioned. Walking home from school at 9:30 a.m., instead of sitting in his AP literature class, Marcus felt the weight of institutional power bearing down on him. Principal Davidson had the authority to destroy 4 years of academic achievement with a single document, and Marcus realized he had no idea how to defend himself against accusations based on the supposed impossibility of his success. The irony wasn't lost on him that his punishment for academic excellence was to be denied access to education. As he approached his apartment complex, Marcus understood that he was facing the fight of his life, not just for his MIT scholarship, but for his future and his family's dreams. What Marcus didn't know was that Mrs. Caldwell had already contacted her former colleague at MIT, and that his calculus assignment was about to receive attention from people who could distinguish between authentic mathematical brilliance and academic fraud. The battle for his future was just beginning, and the stakes couldn't be higher. To understand why Marcus Thompson was willing to fight an accusation that could destroy everything he had worked for, we need to go back to when he was 8 years old, standing in the cramped apartment he shared with his mother and baby sister after his father abandoned the family. Denise Thompson had been working as a certified nursing assistant at Riverside General Hospital for 3 years when her husband left without warning. At 26, she suddenly found herself raising 2 children alone on a salary that barely covered rent and groceries. The apartment in Eastside Commons wasn't in the best neighborhood, but it was what they could afford. Marcus remembered the night his mother sat him down at their small kitchen table, tears streaming down her face as she explained that Daddy wasn't coming back. Instead of promising him things would get better, she made him a different promise. If he worked hard in school, if he never gave up on learning, she would find a way to give him opportunities she never had. That promise became the foundation of Marcus's entire existence. While other kids played video games or watched TV, Marcus spent hours at the public library on Henderson Street. He discovered that books were free, knowledge was accessible, and learning could transport him beyond the limitations of his circumstances. Mrs. Eleanor Hayes, the head librarian, noticed the young boy who arrived every day after school and stayed until closing time. She began recommending advanced books, helping him navigate complex subjects, and eventually created an informal tutoring arrangement where Marcus would help younger children with homework in exchange for access to restricted academic resources.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. By middle school, Marcus had developed study habits that would have impressed college students. He created detailed schedules that balanced his academic work with household responsibilities. When Aisha was old enough for school, Marcus walked her to and from classes every day, helped her with homework, and made sure she understood that education was their pathway to a better life. The grocery store job started during his sophomore year when Denise's hours at the hospital were reduced due to budget cuts. Marcus approached Mr. George Hendricks, the store manager, and negotiated a work schedule that wouldn't interfere with his classes. 20 hours per week stocking shelves, cleaning floors, and operating the cash register brought in enough money to keep their utilities connected. Marcus never complained about the exhaustion that came from working until 9 p.m. and then studying until midnight. He understood that every hour of work was an investment in his family's stability, and every hour of study was an investment in their future. His mother had sacrificed her own educational dreams to support her children. The least he could do was honor that sacrifice with unwavering dedication. The mathematical abilities that had triggered Principal Davidson's suspicion didn't develop overnight. They were the result of systematic self-education that began in 6th grade when Marcus discovered online mathematics courses through the library's Computer Access Program. MIT OpenCourseWare became his private university, where he could access lectures and problem sets that challenged him far beyond his grade level. Mrs. Caldwell had recognized Marcus's exceptional abilities during his junior year and began providing additional resources. She stayed after school twice a week to work through advanced concepts with him, lending him textbooks that weren't part of the standard curriculum. Their sessions weren't just academic instruction, they were mentorship that helped Marcus believe his dreams were achievable. When Marcus received his SAT score senior year, 1580 out of 1600, Mrs. Caldwell immediately contacted her former graduate school roommate, Dr. Patricia Williams, who now served on MIT's Scholarship Selection Committee. The conversation that followed would prove crucial to Marcus's future. Mrs. Caldwell described Marcus's exceptional mathematical intuition, his self-directed learning, and his ability to solve problems using techniques he had taught himself. She mentioned his work schedule, family responsibilities, and the quiet determination that had sustained him through 4 years of academic excellence despite significant obstacles. Dr. Williams was intrigued enough to review Marcus's application personally. His essay about using engineering to improve hospital efficiency, inspired by watching his mother's struggles with outdated systems at work, demonstrated both technical understanding and genuine passion for applying knowledge to solve real-world problems. The full MIT scholarship Marcus received wasn't just about his test scores or grades. It was recognition of his potential to succeed at the highest levels of academic and professional achievement. The scholarship committee had specifically noted his ability to excel despite limited resources, seeing it as evidence of the innovation and resilience that made exceptional engineers. But Marcus's background also included experiences that had taught him to be cautious around authority figures who questioned his capabilities. In 8th grade, his science teacher, Mr. William Crawford, had accused him of copying his science fair project from the internet because the work was too sophisticated for a student from his neighborhood. The accusation was eventually disproven, but not before Marcus endured weeks of humiliation and doubt about his own abilities. That experience had taught Marcus to document his work carefully and to always be prepared to defend his academic achievements. He kept detailed notes about his study methods, saved drafts of his assignments, and maintained records of the resources he used for independent learning. These habits would prove invaluable in the current crisis. The night Marcus brought home the suspension notice, he found his mother preparing for another double shift at the hospital. Denise had been working extra hours to save money for Marcus's college expenses, unaware that his full scholarship covered not just tuition, but also room and board. When Marcus explained Principal Davidson's accusations, Denise felt a familiar rage that she had learned to suppress over years of working in hierarchical institutions. She had witnessed countless examples of bias against people who didn't fit predetermined expectations of success. Her son's achievements were being questioned not because of evidence of wrongdoing, but because they challenged assumptions about what students from their background could accomplish. Denise also understood the broader implications of the suspension. If Marcus was found guilty of academic fraud, his MIT scholarship would be revoked, his acceptance would be withdrawn, and 4 years of sacrifices would be meaningless. Worse, the accusation would follow him to any other college he tried to attend. That night, while Marcus researched legal procedures for academic appeals, Denise called her sister Carmen, who worked as a paralegal in downtown law offices. Carmen had connections in the legal community and understood how institutional power could be challenged when wielded unfairly. The conversation lasted 3 hours as they developed a strategy to protect Marcus's future. Carmen would research precedents for academic fraud accusations, identify potential legal resources, and begin documenting evidence of Marcus's legitimate academic achievements. Meanwhile, Mrs. Caldwell was having her own crisis of conscience in her empty classroom. She had taught for 15 years and had never seen a student with Marcus's combination of raw ability and work ethic. The idea that his achievements were fraudulent was not just wrong, it was an insult to everything she believed about the power of education to transform lives. She opened her laptop and began composing an email to Dr. Williams at MIT, explaining the situation and requesting immediate intervention. The scholarship committee needed to understand that one of their most promising recipients was facing accusations that threatened to destroy his academic future based on prejudice rather than evidence. The email she sent that night would set in motion a series of events that would determine not just Marcus's future, but the future of academic fairness at Lincoln High School. Dr. Williams received Mrs. Caldwell's email at 7:47 a.m. while reviewing scholarship applications in her MIT office. As the chair of the undergraduate admissions committee, she had seen her share of academic controversies, but rarely had they involved students who hadn't even arrived on campus yet. Dr. Williams immediately recognized the gravity of the situation. Marcus Thompson wasn't just any scholarship recipient. He was part of MIT's Bridge to Excellence program, specifically designed to identify and support academically gifted students from underrepresented backgrounds. His profile had been flagged as exceptional during the selection process, not just for his test scores, but for his demonstrated ability to excel despite significant economic obstacles. Williams had forwarded Mrs. Caldwell's email to the entire MIT Scholarship Committee with an urgent meeting request. The committee included Dr. Michael Chen from the Engineering Department, Dr. Rebecca Santos from Student Affairs, and Dr. James Mitchell from the Mathematics Department. All four understood that protecting their scholars from institutional bias was as important as identifying talent in the first place.
Meanwhile, at Lincoln High School, Principal Davidson was implementing what he considered standard procedure for academic fraud investigations. He scheduled meetings with Marcus's other teachers to discuss any concerns about the student's performance, hoping to build a comprehensive case that would justify his suspicions. The first meeting was with Mr. Brian Foster, the mathematics teacher who had initially raised concerns about Marcus's work. Foster had taught at Lincoln High for 8 years and prided himself on maintaining realistic expectations for student achievement. In his experience, students from Marcus's background simply didn't possess the resources or cultural capital necessary for advanced mathematical reasoning. Davidson and Foster spent 45 minutes reviewing Marcus's academic history, noting what they considered inconsistencies between his documented performance and his recent sophisticated work. They developed a theory that Marcus had been receiving unauthorized assistance, possibly from online tutoring services or college students, and had grown overconfident in submitting work beyond his actual capabilities. Their next meeting was with Mrs. Angela Rodriguez, Marcus's AP Literature teacher. Unlike Foster, Rodriguez had consistently been impressed by Marcus's analytical abilities and writing skills. When Davidson explained the investigation, Rodriguez expressed surprise and concern. "I've never seen any indication of academic dishonesty from Marcus," Rodriguez told the principal. "His essays demonstrate original thinking and deep engagement with complex texts. His participation in class discussions shows genuine understanding, not memorized responses." Davidson dismissed her observations as irrelevant to the mathematics fraud investigation, but Rodriguez's defense of Marcus created the first crack in what the principal had assumed would be unanimous faculty support for his actions. The meeting with Mrs. Caldwell was considerably more contentious. Davidson had expected the calculus teacher to provide evidence supporting his suspicions, but instead found himself facing pointed questions about his investigation methods. "Principal Davidson," Mrs. Caldwell said, her voice carefully controlled, "Marcus Thompson has been my most exceptional student in 15 years of teaching. His mathematical intuition and problem-solving abilities are genuinely extraordinary. Rather than investigating him for fraud, we should be celebrating his achievements." Davidson's response revealed the depth of his bias. "Mrs. Caldwell, I understand your desire to believe in your students, but we must be realistic about what's possible given their backgrounds and circumstances. Students from Marcus's environment simply don't develop the kind of advanced capabilities you're describing without outside assistance." The comment stunned Mrs. Caldwell into momentary silence.
She realized that Davidson's investigation wasn't based on evidence of wrongdoing, but on fundamental assumptions about which students were capable of exceptional achievement. That afternoon, while Davidson continued building his case against Marcus, Dr. Williams was coordinating MIT's response. The scholarship committee had unanimously agreed that protecting Marcus was both a moral imperative and an institutional priority. They began developing a multi-pronged strategy to intervene on his behalf. Dr. Chen contacted the College Board to request a detailed analysis of Marcus's SAT performance, looking for any patterns that might suggest cheating. Dr. Santos reached out to the National Merit Scholarship Corporation to verify Marcus's PSAT scores. Dr. Mitchell began reviewing the advanced mathematics work that had triggered the investigation. Their initial findings were unambiguous. Marcus's test scores showed consistent performance across multiple assessments. His essays demonstrated authentic voice and perspective, and his mathematical work reflected genuine understanding rather than copied solutions. While MIT mobilized its resources, Marcus was experiencing the social consequences of his suspension. News of the academic fraud investigation had spread throughout Lincoln High School, creating a toxic environment of speculation and judgment. Students who had previously respected Marcus now whispered about whether his academic achievements had been legitimate. Teachers who had written recommendation letters began questioning their own judgment. The carefully constructed reputation that Marcus had built over 4 years was disintegrating under the weight of institutional suspicion. Aisha, Marcus's younger sister, faced harassment from classmates who taunted her about her brother being a cheater. The stress affected her own academic performance and created tension at home as the family struggled to cope with the crisis. Denise Thompson requested a meeting with Principal Davidson to discuss the impact of the investigation on her family. She took time off from her hospital shift, losing wages they couldn't afford, to advocate for her son's academic integrity. The meeting took place in Davidson's office on a Thursday afternoon. Denise arrived with a folder containing documentation of Marcus's academic progression, including library records showing his extensive independent study, employment records proving his work schedule, and medical records showing he had never been diagnosed with learning disabilities that might explain sudden academic improvement.
Principal Davidson, Denise began, my son has worked harder than any student in this school. He's maintained perfect grades while working 20 hours a week and helping care for his family. The idea that his achievements are fraudulent is not just wrong, it's an insult to everything we've sacrificed. Davidson listened politely, but remained unmoved. Mrs. Thompson, I understand this is difficult for your family, but academic integrity must be protected. The evidence suggests that Marcus submitted work beyond his demonstrated capabilities, which raises serious questions about authenticity. Denise felt the familiar frustration of dealing with institutional authority that had already reached conclusions. What evidence? She asked. Marcus has been an honor student for 4 years. His teachers have consistently praised his work. His standardized test scores confirm his abilities. What specific evidence suggests fraud? Davidson's response revealed the circular logic underlying his investigation. Mrs. Thompson, the sophistication of Marcus's recent work itself constitutes evidence. Students from his background don't typically demonstrate such advanced capabilities without external assistance. The comment crystallized Denise's understanding of what her family was really fighting. This wasn't about academic fraud, it was about institutional bias that couldn't accept exceptional achievement from students who didn't fit predetermined expectations. That evening, Mrs. Caldwell received a call from Dr. Williams at MIT. The conversation lasted 2 hours as they developed a comprehensive strategy for supporting Marcus. MIT would formally request all documentation related to the investigation, provide expert analysis of Marcus's mathematical work,
and offer institutional support for his defense. Dr. Williams also shared crucial information. MIT's legal department was prepared to intervene if necessary to protect their scholarship recipient from discriminatory treatment. The university had faced similar situations before and understood that defending exceptional students sometimes required challenging biased institutional practices. The next morning brought unexpected developments. Dr. Mitchell from MIT arrived at Lincoln High School unannounced, requesting a meeting with Principal Davidson to discuss the Marcus Thompson investigation. His presence immediately elevated the stakes of the controversy. Davidson found himself facing a respected MIT professor who had reviewed Marcus's mathematical work and could speak authoritatively about its authenticity. Dr. Mitchell explained that Marcus's solutions demonstrated genuine understanding and creativity, not copied or assisted work. The principal attempted to maintain his position, but Dr. Mitchell's expert analysis systematically dismantled every aspect of the fraud accusation. The mathematical techniques Marcus had used were sophisticated but achievable for a student with his demonstrated abilities and self-directed learning history. More significantly, Dr. Mitchell revealed that MIT had been monitoring Marcus's progress through Mrs. Caldwell's informal reports and had specifically recruited him because of his exceptional mathematical intuition. The university's scholarship committee had reviewed hundreds of applications and identified Marcus as one of their most promising incoming students. As Dr. Mitchell left Lincoln High School, Davidson realized that his investigation had attracted attention from one of the world's most prestigious universities. The stakes had escalated far beyond a simple academic fraud case. He was now facing institutional pressure from MIT itself.
That afternoon, Davidson received a formal letter from MIT's legal department requesting all documentation related to Marcus Thompson's suspension and outlining the university's position that their scholarship recipient was being subjected to discriminatory treatment based on biased assumptions rather than evidence. The letter marked a turning point in the controversy. What had begun as a principal's suspicion about one student's work had become a confrontation between a small-town high school and one of America's most respected universities. The battle for Marcus's academic reputation was about to intensify dramatically. While MIT's legal department prepared their formal challenge to Lincoln High School, investigative journalist Rachel Barnes from the Metro Education Weekly was conducting her own research into Principal Davidson's administrative history. Barnes had received an anonymous tip about the Marcus Thompson case and recognized it as part of a larger pattern worth investigating. Her initial records request to the school district revealed troubling statistics about Lincoln High School's disciplinary actions over the past 5 years. Under Davidson's leadership, suspension rates for Black and Latino students had increased by 340%, while academic integrity violations for these same populations had risen by 280%. White students with similar academic profiles faced significantly fewer accusations and lighter penalties for comparable infractions. Barnes discovered that Marcus Thompson wasn't the first exceptional student of color to face unexpected academic fraud allegations at Lincoln High. The pattern stretched back to Davidson's second year as principal when he had accused valedictorian candidate Angela Martinez of plagiarizing her senior thesis, despite her 4-year track record of original work. That case had been quietly resolved after Martinez's family hired an attorney, but not before the stress caused her to withdraw from several college applications. She eventually attended a local community college instead of the Ivy League schools that had recruited her. 2 years later, Davidson had suspended honor student Kevin Washington for allegedly cheating on his SAT exam after his scores improved dramatically between test administrations. The College Board's investigation found no evidence of cheating, but the suspension remained on Washington's record and affected his college admissions prospects.
Most recently, Davidson had accused jazz ensemble leader Malik Johnson of stealing musical compositions after the students submitted original pieces that demonstrated sophisticated harmonic understanding. The accusations were dropped only after Johnson's private music teacher provided detailed documentation of the students' creative process. Barnes realized she was looking at a systematic pattern of targeting high-achieving students of color with academic fraud allegations that conveniently emerged just as they were approaching major academic milestones. The timing suggested these weren't random investigations, but strategic efforts to undermine exceptional minority achievement. Her research into Davidson's background revealed the ideological foundations of his bias. Before becoming a principal, Davidson had been active in educational policy circles that promoted theories about racial differences in academic capability. He had attended conferences and workshops that presented pseudoscientific research, claiming genetic limitations on intellectual achievement among certain populations. Davidson's college thesis, available through the university library archives, had argued that affirmative action programs created unrealistic expectations for minority students who were allegedly unprepared for rigorous academic environments. His writing revealed deep-seated beliefs that exceptional achievement by students of color was inherently suspicious and probably artificial. These beliefs had been reinforced by Davidson's social and professional networks. He belonged to an informal group of administrators who shared similar views about maintaining academic standards by questioning extraordinary achievement from unexpected sources. Their private communications, obtained through public records requests, revealed explicit discussions about preventing demographic changes in academic achievement patterns that might attract unwanted attention from civil rights organizations or federal oversight agencies.
Whitman had advised Davidson to be strategic about which students to target, focusing on those approaching major milestones like valedictorian status or prestigious scholarships that would generate public attention. The goal was to maintain traditional achievement hierarchies while avoiding the appearance of systematic discrimination. These communications provided smoking gun evidence that Marcus's academic fraud accusation wasn't based on legitimate concerns about cheating, but was part of a deliberate strategy to prevent a black student from achieving high-profile academic recognition that might challenge established assumptions about intellectual capability. Barnes realized she had uncovered not just one principal's bias, but an institutional conspiracy to suppress minority achievement through systematic fraud accusations. The story had implications far beyond Lincoln High School, potentially exposing similar practices in districts across the country. As she prepared to publish her investigation, Barnes contacted Dr. Williams at MIT to share her findings. The evidence would transform Marcus's individual case into a federal civil rights issue, with the potential to fundamentally change how academic fraud allegations were investigated and adjudicated. The revelation that Davidson's accusations were part of a years-long pattern of discrimination would shift the entire narrative from whether Marcus had cheated to why exceptional minority students were being systematically targeted for fraud allegations at the moment of their greatest academic recognition. The battle for Marcus Thompson's future was about to become a battle for educational justice that would expose the institutional racism hidden behind the rhetoric of academic integrity and merit-based achievement. Rachel Barnes published her explosive investigation on a Monday morning with the headline, "Educational Apartheid: How One Principal Systematically Targeted Minority Students with Fraud Allegations." The article immediately went viral on social media and was picked up by national news outlets within hours. The response was swift and far-reaching. The NAACP Legal Defense Fund announced they were opening an investigation into civil rights violations at Lincoln High School. The Department of Education's Office for Civil Rights received formal complaints from 3 different advocacy organizations. The State Attorney General's Office launched a preliminary inquiry into potential criminal violations of students' constitutional rights. Meanwhile, MIT's legal team was coordinating with federal investigators to provide evidence supporting Marcus Thompson's case.
Dr. Williams had assembled a comprehensive dossier documenting Marcus's legitimate academic progression, including time-stamped online learning records, library computer usage logs, and detailed analysis of his mathematical problem-solving methods. The university's computer science department had conducted a sophisticated analysis of Marcus's digital footprint, tracking his online study habits over 4 years. The data showed consistent patterns of late-night research sessions, gradual progression through increasingly complex mathematical concepts, and engagement with educational resources that explained his advanced capabilities. Dr. Mitchell worked with MIT's mathematics faculty to create a detailed breakdown of Marcus's calculus solutions, demonstrating that each technique he employed could be traced to specific online resources he had accessed. The analysis proved that his work reflected genuine understanding rather than copied answers or external assistance. Carmen Rodriguez, Marcus's aunt and the paralegal who had been researching legal precedents, made a crucial discovery in the federal court archives. She found a similar case from 2018 where a school district in Texas had been successfully sued for systematically targeting minority students with academic fraud allegations. The settlement in that case had established important legal precedents for proving discriminatory intent in educational settings. The Texas case revealed that prosecutors had used statistical analysis to demonstrate bias, comparing accusation rates and penalty severity across different demographic groups. Carmen realized that Rachel Barnes's investigation had provided similar statistical evidence for Lincoln High School, creating a strong foundation for a federal civil rights lawsuit. Dr. Rebecca Santos from MIT's Student Affairs Office was coordinating with the National Education Association to document similar cases at other schools. Their research revealed that Lincoln High School's practices weren't isolated incidents, but part of a broader national pattern affecting high-achieving minority students approaching graduation and college admissions. The investigation expanded when former Lincoln High School students began contacting Barnes after reading her article. Tyler Johnson, who had graduated 3 years earlier, came forward with evidence that Principal Davidson had questioned his academic achievements in a way that discouraged him from applying to competitive universities. Jessica Washington, Kevin Washington's older sister, provided documentation showing how her brother's academic fraud accusation had affected his entire family. The stress had contributed to his father's decision to transfer jobs to another state, disrupting the family's stability and affecting Jessica's own educational opportunities. Most significantly, Angela Martinez contacted Barnes with preserved evidence from her senior year academic fraud accusation. Martinez had kept detailed records of her interactions with Principal Davidson, including emails that revealed his assumptions about her capabilities based on her ethnicity and family background. The accumulating testimony from multiple families created a powerful narrative about the long-term damage caused by Davidson's discriminatory practices. Each case showed how academic fraud accusations had derailed promising futures and created lasting trauma for students who had worked exceptionally hard to achieve academic success. Dr. Patricia Williams coordinated MIT's response by establishing the Educational Justice Initiative, a university-wide program designed to support students facing discriminatory treatment at their high schools. The initiative included legal assistance, academic verification services, and direct intervention with school administrators who questioned legitimate student achievements. The program's first major intervention was on behalf of Marcus Thompson. MIT sent a delegation including Dr. Williams, Dr. Mitchell, and University Legal Counsel to meet directly with the Lincoln High School Board of Directors. The meeting was scheduled for Thursday afternoon, with national media attention focused on the outcome. Meanwhile, Mrs. Caldwell was working with other Lincoln High faculty members to document the internal culture that had enabled Davidson's discriminatory practices. 5 teachers agreed to provide sworn statements about administrative pressure to apply different standards of scrutiny to minority students demonstrating exceptional achievement. Mr. Foster, the mathematics teacher who had initially raised concerns about Marcus's work, experienced a crisis of conscience after reading Barnes's investigation. He realized that his suspicions had been influenced by unconscious bias rather than legitimate concerns about academic integrity. Foster contacted Mrs. Caldwell and offered to provide testimony supporting Marcus's capabilities. The breakthrough came when Dr. Harold Whitman, Davidson's mentor and former superintendent, agreed to cooperate with federal investigators in exchange for immunity from prosecution. He provided access to years of internal communications that documented the systematic nature of the discrimination and revealed the involvement of other administrators across multiple school districts. His testimony exposed a network of educators who had developed informal protocols for preventing minority students from achieving high-profile academic recognition. The network had shared strategies through professional conferences, online forums, and private communications that federal investigators were now analyzing for evidence of coordinated civil rights violations. The investigation also revealed financial corruption connected to the discriminatory practices. Lincoln High School had received federal grants for programs designed to support minority student achievement, but administrators had systematically undermined these programs while reporting inflated success statistics to maintain funding. Principal Davidson had used his position on the State Education Advisory Committee to influence policy discussions about academic fraud detection, promoting guidelines that effectively targeted minority students for increased scrutiny. His recommendations had been adopted by other districts, spreading discriminatory practices beyond Lincoln High School. Federal investigators discovered that Davidson had been invited to speak at education conferences about maintaining academic integrity, where he had shared his methods for identifying suspicious achievement patterns. His presentations had influenced hundreds of administrators across multiple states, potentially affecting thousands of minority students.
The scope of the investigation expanded when the Department of Education's Office for Civil Rights found similar patterns in 12 other school districts, where administrators had attended Davidson's presentations or implemented his recommended protocols. The case was evolving from a single incident of discrimination into a federal investigation of systematic civil rights violations across multiple states. Dr. Williams received a call from the White House Office of Educational Policy, where officials were monitoring the case as part of broader efforts to address educational inequality. The administration was considering using Marcus's case as a catalyst for comprehensive reforms in how academic fraud allegations were investigated and adjudicated nationwide. As evidence mounted against Principal Davidson and the systematic discrimination at Lincoln High School, Marcus Thompson found himself at the center of a movement that extended far beyond his individual case. The mathematical ability that had triggered his academic fraud accusation was now being celebrated as evidence of the exceptional talent that discriminatory practices had been designed to suppress. The investigation had uncovered not just Davidson's bias, but an entire infrastructure of educational discrimination that had operated in shadows for years. Federal investigators were preparing criminal charges, civil rights organizations were planning systematic reforms, and universities like MIT were implementing new programs to protect students from institutional prejudice. The evidence gathered over 2 weeks of intensive investigation had transformed Marcus's suspension from an isolated incident into a federal case with implications for educational justice across the entire country. The final confrontation was approaching, and the stakes had escalated beyond anything Davidson could have anticipated when he first questioned Marcus's calculus solutions. The Lincoln High School boardroom was packed beyond capacity on Thursday evening, with overflow crowds gathered in the hallway and parking lot. News vans from major networks lined the street as the emergency school board meeting convened to address the federal civil rights investigation that had engulfed the district. Board President Margaret Stevens called the meeting to order, her voice tight with tension, as she acknowledged the unprecedented circumstances facing the district. The 5-member board had spent the previous 48 hours in emergency sessions with attorneys, trying to develop a response to allegations that threatened both criminal prosecution and the loss of millions in federal funding. Principal Davidson sat alone at a table facing the board, looking haggard and isolated. His attorney, David Hutchinson, had advised him to remain silent throughout the proceedings, but Davidson appeared to be struggling with the weight of evidence that had accumulated against him over the past 2 weeks. Dr. Patricia Williams led the MIT delegation, accompanied by Dr. Mitchell, University Legal Counsel Sandra Freeman, and Marcus Thompson himself. Marcus wore his best suit, the same one he had planned to wear to his MIT orientation, sitting with quiet dignity despite the media attention focused on his case. Federal prosecutor Elena Vasquez was present as an observer, though her presence sent a clear message that criminal charges were being seriously considered. The Department of Education's Office for Civil Rights had also sent representatives to monitor the proceedings and ensure that appropriate remedial actions were implemented. Board member Thomas Richardson opened the questioning by addressing Principal Davidson directly. Mr. Davidson, we've reviewed the federal investigation findings, including statistical analysis showing disproportionate academic fraud accusations against minority students during your tenure. How do you respond to these allegations? Davidson's attorney attempted to control the narrative by presenting his client's actions as good faith efforts to maintain academic integrity. However, the board had access to internal communications that revealed Davidson's discriminatory motivations, making his defense increasingly untenable. Dr. Williams requested permission to present MIT's analysis of Marcus Thompson's academic achievements. She methodically demonstrated that Marcus's mathematical abilities were not only legitimate but represented exceptional talent that should have been celebrated rather than questioned. The calculus solutions that triggered this investigation reflect genuine understanding and creative problem-solving, Dr. Williams explained to the packed room. Our analysis shows clear progression in Marcus's mathematical thinking over 4 years, consistent with intensive self-directed learning. There is no evidence of external assistance or fraudulent behavior. Dr. Mitchell supplemented this testimony by explaining how MIT's scholarship committee had specifically identified Marcus as an exceptional candidate based on his demonstrated ability to excel despite limited resources. The university's investment in Marcus represented confidence in his potential to succeed at the highest levels of academic achievement. The most damaging testimony came from Dr. Harold Whitman, the retired superintendent who had mentored Davidson. Under federal immunity agreement, Whitman detailed the systematic nature of the discrimination and revealed communications that showed deliberate targeting of minority students approaching academic milestones. Whitman's testimony exposed the ideological foundations of Davidson's practices, including explicit discussions about preventing demographic changes in academic achievement patterns. The evidence showed that Marcus's case wasn't an isolated incident, but the culmination of years of systematic discrimination designed to suppress minority academic success. Board member Lisa Rodriguez questioned Davidson about specific cases involving previous students. Angela Martinez, Kevin Washington, and Malik Johnson had all faced similar accusations at crucial moments in their academic careers, creating a clear pattern of discriminatory enforcement that couldn't be explained by legitimate concerns about academic integrity. The testimony from these former students was particularly powerful. Angela Martinez, now a college senior studying biochemistry, described how Davidson's accusations had derailed her academic trajectory and forced her to rebuild her confidence in educational settings. Her composure while recounting the trauma she experienced highlighted the long-term damage caused by discriminatory practices. Kevin Washington's testimony focused on the broader impact on his family, including his sister's educational opportunities and his father's career decisions. The ripple effects of academic fraud accusations extended far beyond individual students, affecting entire families and communities that had invested heavily in educational achievement. Mrs. Jennifer Caldwell provided crucial testimony about the internal culture at Lincoln High School that had enabled Davidson's discriminatory practices.
She described administrative pressure to apply different standards of scrutiny to minority students and revealed how faculty meetings had gradually normalized assumptions about which students were capable of exceptional achievement. The most dramatic moment came when Mr. Brian Foster, the mathematics teacher who had initially questioned Marcus's work, requested permission to address the board. Foster had experienced a profound change of perspective after reviewing the evidence of systematic discrimination and recognizing his own unconscious bias. "I was wrong about Marcus Thompson," Foster stated, his voice breaking with emotion. "My suspicions were based on prejudiced assumptions rather than educational judgment. Marcus is an exceptional student whose achievements should have been celebrated, not questioned." Foster's testimony was particularly powerful because it demonstrated how institutional bias could influence well-meaning educators who weren't consciously prejudiced but had been conditioned to apply discriminatory standards of evaluation. Federal Prosecutor Vasquez addressed the board about the criminal investigation's findings. The evidence showed systematic violations of students' constitutional rights, potential mail fraud related to federal grant applications, and conspiracy to deprive citizens of civil rights under color of law.
The prosecutor outlined 3 potential outcomes: criminal prosecution of individual administrators, a consent decree requiring federal oversight of district practices, or a negotiated settlement including comprehensive reforms and financial penalties. The board's response to the immediate situation would influence which path the federal government pursued. Board President Stevens announced that Principal Davidson was being placed on immediate administrative leave pending the completion of all investigations. The board also voted unanimously to expunge Marcus Thompson's academic fraud accusation from his record and issue a formal apology for the discriminatory treatment he had received. More significantly, the board approved a comprehensive reform package developed in consultation with civil rights organizations and the Department of Education. The reforms included mandatory bias training for all staff, independent review of disciplinary decisions affecting minority students, and establishment of an ombudsman position to investigate discrimination complaints. Dr. Williams addressed the board about MIT's ongoing support for Marcus and other students affected by similar discrimination. The university was expanding its educational justice initiative to provide systematic assistance for students facing biased treatment and would maintain oversight of Marcus's case to ensure no retaliation occurred. Marcus Thompson finally spoke publicly about his experience, addressing the packed room with quiet strength. "This investigation has revealed that my case wasn't isolated, but part of a system designed to limit opportunities for students who look like me. I hope my experience will prevent other students from facing similar discrimination and help create educational environments where all students can achieve their potential." The board meeting concluded with announcements about ongoing federal oversight and implementation of comprehensive reforms. Davidson's resignation was announced the following morning, along with the retirement of 2 other administrators implicated in discriminatory practices. Within 24 hours, Marcus received formal notification that his MIT scholarship remained intact and that the university had created an additional academic support program to ensure his smooth transition to college. The legal cloud that had threatened to destroy his future had been definitively lifted. The resolution of Marcus's case sent shockwaves through educational communities nationwide. School districts across the country began reviewing their own disciplinary practices and implementing reforms to prevent similar discrimination. The case became a landmark precedent for protecting minority students from institutional bias disguised as academic integrity enforcement. Federal investigators continued pursuing criminal charges against Davidson and other administrators involved in the conspiracy. The case established important legal precedents for prosecuting educational discrimination as a federal crime and provided a roadmap for future civil rights enforcement in academic settings. 3 years after his expulsion letter was publicly torn up at the Lincoln High School board meeting, Marcus Thompson stood at the podium in MIT's Kresge Auditorium addressing an audience of 2,000 educators, civil rights advocates, and policymakers at the National Conference on Educational Equity. Marcus had just completed his junior year at MIT with a 3.9 GPA, specializing in computational mathematics with a focus on algorithmic bias detection. His academic excellence had continued at the university level, but more importantly, he had channeled his experience with educational trauma into research that was changing how institutions identified and prevented systematic bias. The auditorium fell silent as Marcus began his keynote address, titled "From Victim to Victory: How Educational Trauma Became My Life's Purpose." His opening words carried the weight of lived experience and hard-won wisdom. 3 years ago, I was suspended from high school for the crime of being too good at mathematics while black. Today, I'm developing algorithms that help institutions detect and prevent the kind of discrimination I experienced. This transformation didn't happen overnight, and it wasn't without significant cost to my family and my own psychological well-being. The audience included Dr. Patricia Williams, now serving as Associate Provost for Educational Justice at MIT, and Mrs. Jennifer Caldwell, who had left Lincoln High School to join MIT's teacher preparation program. Both women had become national advocates for educational reform, using Marcus's case as a catalyst for systematic change. Marcus's journey at MIT had been marked by exceptional academic achievement, but also by the ongoing work of processing educational trauma. The university had provided comprehensive support through their Educational Justice Initiative, including counseling services, academic mentoring, and leadership development opportunities that helped transform his painful experience into purposeful action. During his sophomore year, Marcus had collaborated with MIT's Computer Science and Artificial Intelligence Laboratory to develop the Educational Equity Assessment Tool, a software program that analyzed disciplinary and academic fraud accusation patterns to identify potential discrimination. The tool was now being pilot tested in 200 school districts across 15 states. The technology worked by examining statistical patterns in how academic fraud allegations were distributed across different demographic groups, timing of accusations relative to academic milestones, and outcomes of investigations based on student characteristics. Early results showed that Marcus's experience at Lincoln High School was part of a much broader national pattern affecting thousands of students annually. Dr. Williams had used these findings to secure a $12 million federal grant for the Systematic Educational Bias Prevention Initiative, headquartered at MIT, but involving partnerships with historically black colleges and universities, civil rights organizations, and the Department of Education. The initiative was developing comprehensive strategies for identifying, documenting, and eliminating discriminatory practices in educational settings. The legal aftermath of Marcus's case had continued to reverberate through the judicial system. Federal prosecutors had successfully convicted Principal Davidson and 2 other administrators on civil rights conspiracy charges, resulting in prison sentences ranging from 18 months to 3 years. The convictions established important legal precedents for prosecuting educational discrimination as a federal crime and provided a roadmap for future civil rights enforcement in academic settings. The legislative aftermath of Marcus's case had prompted comprehensive legislative reform. The Educational Civil Rights Protection Act, passed by Congress and signed into law 18 months after Marcus's vindication, required all schools receiving federal funding to implement systematic bias detection protocols and provided federal funding for independent ombudsman programs to investigate discrimination complaints. The law also established the National Center for Educational Justice, a federal agency dedicated to monitoring and preventing discrimination in academic settings. Marcus had testified before Congress during the bill's development, providing first-hand testimony about how institutional bias affected students and families. Rachel Barnes, the investigative journalist who had exposed the systematic discrimination at Lincoln High School, had won a Pulitzer Prize for her reporting. Her follow-up investigations had revealed similar patterns in 47 school districts across 12 states, leading to federal interventions that protected hundreds of students from discriminatory treatment. Barnes had also authored a book, The Algebra of Injustice: How American Schools Systematically Suppress Minority Achievement, which became required reading in education policy programs nationwide. The book documented not just the discrimination Marcus faced, but the broader institutional structures that enabled such treatment to persist for years without detection. Lincoln High School itself had undergone comprehensive transformation under federal oversight. The district had implemented new leadership, mandatory bias training for all staff, independent review of all disciplinary decisions, and community oversight committees that included civil rights advocates and affected families. Dr. Susan Martinez, the new principal at Lincoln High School, was a former civil rights attorney who had been specifically recruited to rebuild the school's culture. Under her leadership, the school had become a model for educational equity, with achievement gaps between different demographic groups eliminated and college enrollment rates reaching all-time highs across all populations.
The school now hosted an annual Marcus Thompson Educational Justice Symposium, where students, teachers, and community members discuss strategies for recognizing and preventing discrimination. Marcus returned each year to speak with current students about the importance of believing in their own capabilities despite institutional barriers. Mrs. Caldwell's transition from high school teacher to MIT faculty had been facilitated by her role in exposing the discrimination Marcus faced. She now directed the university's teacher preparation program, training the next generation of educators to recognize their own unconscious biases and advocate for all students regardless of background. Her work focused on developing curricula that helped teachers understand how systematic discrimination operated in educational settings and provided practical tools for interrupting bias when it emerged. The program had become a national model, with similar initiatives implemented at universities across the country. The ripple effects of Marcus's case extended far beyond individual institutional changes. The Department of Education had revised federal guidelines for investigating academic fraud allegations, requiring schools to demonstrate clear evidence of wrongdoing before suspending students, and mandating statistical analysis of accusation patterns to identify potential discrimination. These policy changes had protected hundreds of students from experiencing the kind of trauma Marcus endured. The new guidelines required schools to provide due process protections, independent review of fraud allegations, and family advocacy support during investigations. Marcus's younger sister Aisha had thrived in the aftermath of her brother's vindication. Now a high school senior herself, she had been accepted to Harvard, Stanford, and Columbia with full scholarships. Her academic achievements were celebrated rather than questioned, reflecting the cultural changes that Marcus's case had helped create. Aisha often spoke about how watching her brother fight institutional discrimination had inspired her own commitment to social justice. She planned to study law with the goal of representing students facing educational discrimination, continuing the family's dedication to educational equity. The financial settlement from Marcus's federal civil rights lawsuit had transformed his family's economic circumstances. The $2.8 million award had enabled his mother Denise to complete her nursing degree and purchase their own home. She now worked as a patient advocate at Riverside General Hospital, using her experience with institutional bias to help families navigate complex medical systems. Denise frequently spoke at conferences about the family impact of educational discrimination, describing how Marcus's suspension had affected not just his academic prospects, but the entire family's emotional and financial well-being. Her testimony had been instrumental in developing family support provisions in the Educational Civil Rights Protection Act. The MIT Educational Justice Initiative had expanded far beyond Marcus's individual case to become a comprehensive program supporting students facing discrimination nationwide. The initiative provided legal assistance, academic verification services, counseling support, and advocacy training for students and families dealing with institutional bias. Dr. Williams had established partnerships with law schools, civil rights organizations, and community advocacy groups to create a national network capable of rapid response to educational discrimination cases. The network had successfully intervened in 127 cases over 3 years, preventing wrongful academic penalties and establishing precedents for student protection.
Marcus's research on algorithmic bias detection had attracted attention from major technology companies seeking to identify and eliminate discrimination in their own systems. He had completed internships at Google and Microsoft, working on machine learning applications that could recognize patterns of systematic bias in large datasets. His senior thesis, titled Computational Approaches to Detecting Institutional Discrimination in Educational Settings, was being published in the Journal of Educational Data Mining and had already been cited by researchers developing similar tools for healthcare, employment, and criminal justice applications. The technology Marcus developed was particularly innovative because it could identify subtle patterns of discrimination that might not be obvious to human observers. The algorithms could detect when students with similar academic profiles were treated differently based on demographic characteristics, even when individual cases might not seem obviously discriminatory. Looking toward his future, Marcus had been accepted to MIT's doctoral program in computational social science, with plans to continue developing technology for bias detection and prevention. He had also received offers from Harvard Law School and Stanford Business School, reflecting his potential to create change through multiple professional pathways. However, Marcus had decided to pursue his PhD first, recognizing that his unique combination of personal experience with discrimination and technical expertise positioned him to make fundamental contributions to educational justice research. The broader impact of Marcus's case extended to international educational systems as well. UNESCO had invited him to present his research at conferences in Geneva and Paris, where education ministers from 34 countries discussed strategies for preventing discrimination in their own school systems. His story had been featured in documentary films, academic case studies, and policy reports that were influencing educational reform efforts globally. The case demonstrated how individual acts of courage could catalyze systematic change that protected vulnerable populations from institutional abuse.
As Marcus concluded his keynote address at the National Conference on Educational Equity, he reflected on the transformation that had occurred since that devastating morning when he received his expulsion letter. The discrimination I faced was designed to destroy my academic future and send a message to other students who looked like me that exceptional achievement would not be tolerated. Instead, it became the foundation for a movement that has protected thousands of students and fundamentally changed how educational institutions address bias and discrimination. The standing ovation that followed lasted for 5 minutes, with audience members wiping away tears as they contemplated both the injustice Marcus had endured and the remarkable changes his courage had created. After the conference, Marcus returned to his MIT dormitory room, where acceptance letters to graduate programs sat on his desk alongside research papers he was reviewing for his thesis. The small space reflected his journey from a suspended high school student to a nationally recognized advocate for educational justice. That evening, Marcus received a text message from Angela Martinez, the former Lincoln High School student whose own academic fraud accusation had preceded his by several years. She was now completing her medical residency and had been inspired by Marcus's advocacy to establish a scholarship program for students facing educational discrimination. Other former Lincoln High School students had also transformed their experiences with bias into advocacy work. Kevin Washington had become a teacher specializing in supporting students from underrepresented backgrounds. Malik Johnson had completed his music education degree and was developing programs that celebrated cultural diversity in school arts programs. The network of students who had experienced discrimination at Lincoln High School had become a powerful force for educational reform, demonstrating how shared trauma could be transformed into collective action for justice. As Marcus prepared for sleep, he thought about the millions of students across the country who would benefit from the changes his case had created. Academic fraud accusations were now subject to federal oversight.
Bias detection algorithms were identifying discrimination before it could destroy student futures, and educators were being trained to recognize and interrupt their own prejudices. The mathematics assignment that had triggered his suspension 3 years earlier now sat framed on his dormitory wall, not as a reminder of injustice, but as a symbol of how intellectual excellence could overcome institutional barriers when supported by courage, advocacy, and systematic reform. Marcus Thompson's journey from expelled student to educational justice advocate represented more than individual resilience. It demonstrated how institutional discrimination could be challenged, documented, and eliminated through the combined efforts of students, families, educators, legal advocates, and policymakers committed to creating truly equitable educational environments. The legacy of his case would continue inspiring future generations of students to believe in their own capabilities, seek support when facing discrimination, and transform their experiences with injustice into opportunities for creating systematic change that protected others from similar harm.
Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.